Hello. Okay, so this is a little video I'm making as a tutorial about a midpoint formula lesson in case you missed that day or you just really want a refresher of what this means. Okay, so before we get into midpoint formula, which has to do with coordinates like x and y types of coordinates, let's just kind of review how to get the mean of something or the average, or which is really the midpoint. So mean is in mean, median, mode, and range. That's concepts you were taught hopefully about 3 years ago. That mean is a fancy way of saying average. The word average is probably, if you play sports, you probably hear the word average a lot, like um, field goal average, average punt and stuff like that. So, and that's really midpoint. Midpoint is really like an average between two numbers, really. So if you want the mean or the average, or really what you do is, okay, I'll do this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all the same thing. I just changed the word mean and average. They mean the same thing. Mean and average is the same thing. All right, so what you do for all four of those is you would, okay, so you're going to add them together. So I'm adding -4 plus 10, and then you divide it by 2, and that's the mean or the average. So that means that 3 is the mean or the average between -4 and 10. And that's what you do for these ones, all four of these. So let's say for number 5 and 6, like instead of given two numbers, you're given a number line, okay, like this. So what you do is you take the smallest number, and 5 would be 2, and you take the biggest number, which is 10, and you get the mean of those numbers. So I'll do 6 because that's a little weird, but it's the same concept as 5. All right, I take the smallest number, which is -8, and I add the biggest number, which is 0, and I divide it by 2, and that means the mean is -4. Midpoint is -4. Like literally, it is the middle of the number line. Okay, so let's talk about how to actually do this. All right, a coordinate plane is a plane that's divided into 4 regions or quadrants. That is quadrants, okay, by a horizontal line, which is the x-axis, and a vertical line that is the y-axis. The location or coordinate, that's really the fancy word for location, of a point are given by an ordered pair, and that is x comma y. Okay. So now I want you to be able to identify where would these 4 points be on a coordinate plane. Imagine each grid line counts as 1. So for example, if I were to do C is 5 comma -2. The 5 means I go 5 spaces to the right. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The -2 means I go down 2, 1, and 2, and here is what it is. Okay, right there. So that's what you should be able to do. Okay, now here's the formula of the day. This is called midpoint formula. Here it is. So the midpoint M of AB with endpoints A and B is found by using this. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate how to do this. Basically, what midpoint formula is that this, what I'm circling, is an x value. This turns into an x value. This turns into a y value. So what midpoint formula is you have to do the mean or the average twice. You have to do it once for the x value and once for the y value, and that gives you a coordinate. So like a coordinate is the actual answer for this. So every single problem today, you got to do mean twice. You got to do it for the x's and you got to do it for the y's, and then you put them together and the coordinate's the answer. For example, find the coordinates of the midpoint of the line segment AB with endpoints -4, 6 and 2, -9. So first up, you need to do the mean of my x values, which is -4 and 2. That is the x values in those two coordinates, and then you divide it by 2. That means -1 is the x value of the midpoint. And then you do the mean of the y values, and that gives you -1.5. So that means that the midpoint of A and B in that specific example would be -1, -1.5. And that would be the answer for that example. So some questions you're given the coordinates, some questions you're just given a graph, and it's the same thing. You just got to figure out the endpoints. Like, can you read coordinates and figure out the endpoints? Okay. So, oops, hold on. Where'd that go? Okay, so for ones like this example and these questions here, you have to identify the coordinates you're given. Okay, so what are the endpoints of this? All right, so this one down below looks like it's at 3 comma -1. That is the coordinate of that endpoint. This one up here, what is that? That is 5. So that's 5 comma, I don't know, I gotta count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that is 5 comma 5. All right, now that I have those two coordinates, I'm going to do slope formula again. So first up, let's do the mean of the x values. So that'd be 3 plus 5 divided by 2. It's 4. All right, let's do the mean of the y values is 2. So that means the answer for that specific graph would be 4 comma 2. And that's how you do it. That's how you do like everything. Well, that's how you do this section, which I'm requiring you to try to do. And also this section here where you're just given coordinates. So this is like you're given graphs. You have to get the coordinates, and then you get the midpoint via what I just explained how to do. These are easier. You don't have to get the coordinates. There's the coordinates. You just got to do the midpoint formula with all these. This is a word problem where it's just a word problem about the exact same thing. I mean, it's asking you about like what would be what would be the midpoint between these two houses? It's the same amount, but you're gonna have to, once you get the midpoint, you're gonna have to yeah, actually skip A. Don't worry about A, but B you should be able to do. Just like, yeah. It won't do A because A actually involves what I'm teaching next class. Just notice that. Yeah, don't worry about A. Like skip this one, but do B. You can do B, but it's a word problem about the same thing. All right, so here's why the warm up, if you come to class, is like solving with parentheses and stuff. Okay, so let's say you have the midpoint, and now you need one of the endpoints. So like this is like a little bit harder, but it's involved in the exact same formula. So like the previous ones are like you're given 2 endpoints. What's the midpoint? This is you're given the midpoint and one of the endpoints, and you have to figure out the other endpoint. Okay. So let me show you how to do my examples here, and I'm going to follow the process I wrote up here. So set up the midpoint formula, but you have the midpoint and are missing one coordinate. Solve for x and y of the missing endpoint separately. Okay, so let me show you what that means. Okay, so what this means is like, okay, we have, first up, let's do the midpoint for x. Okay, so the x value for, so again, like midpoint is if I were to take that 2 here and I were to add it to some value, some other endpoint, and then I were to divide it by 2, that should equal -3. No, I'm sorry, not -3. Crap, I'm looking at the wrong one. 4. Okay, so what we have here is this 2 comes from this endpoint. This 4 is the midpoint, and I don't know what the other endpoint is. So I actually have to solve for x inside of this. How do you do that? Well, you multiply both sides times 2, and because I need to get rid of this dividing by 2. If I multiply both sides times 2, that just creates 2 plus x on the left side, and then 4 times 2 is 8. And then if you subtract 2 from both sides, because this is positive 2, we find out that the x value of that endpoint is 6, because that's 8 minus 2. All right, now I got to do the exact same thing with the y values. So that is, again, 2, because that's the y value of this endpoint, plus our y value divided by 2 is equal to, in this sense, it's -3. Okay, so that's negative, this -3. So this 2 comes from that 2. It's always divided by 2 because there's 2 things, and then it equals 3. All right, so now I'm going to do the exact same process I did up here. first step is you multiply times 2. I multiply everything times 2. That creates 2 plus y equals negative 6. And then here I subtracted away whatever's here, and that creates the y value of negative 8. So that would mean the missing endpoint in that example would be the x value is 6, the y value is negative 8. And that would be the answer for that example. All right, I'm going to do this second example, and then I'm going to, again, if I'm going too fast, this is a video. You can rewind and watch again if you wish. Okay, so now I'm going to do the endpoint and midpoint with this one. So that's negative 3 plus I don't know over 2 is equal to negative 10, because that is the x value in the midpoint. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same process. I multiply times 2. So notice when I multiply times 2, it doesn't change the numerator. Okay, when you multiply this entire thing times 2, it makes the dividing by 2 cancel out, and the numerator doesn't change. It doesn't change. All right, so now I got to get rid of negative 3. How do I get rid of negative 3? You add 3. So by adding 3 to negative 20, you get negative 17. That's the x value of the other endpoint. Okay, so now let's do the exact same process with the y values. That is 5 plus y. Control y is equal to 1, because that's the y value. All right, multiply times 2. 5 plus y equals 2. If you do 2 minus 5, you find out the y value of the endpoint is negative 3. Therefore, the answer to that would be negative 17 divided by negative 3. And that is the endpoint for that. That's how you do it. Okay, so if you were here in class, notice that the warm-ups will all look kind of like this, all right, or like this, because I was making sure you can do this type of algebra to get the geometry question correct. So that's how you do these four, and that is it. I hope this was helpful. Have a good rest of your day.